All right, we are just about ready to begin. We are beginning a new section, and let's review, relevant to the new section, what we have been doing. We are looking at various methods of forecasting and predicting. And we began by speaking of transits. And let's try to get a picture of what a transit is. The birth moment is an event. And in the event that we're talking about, an individual is born. We make the horoscope, which is a map of how all of the astrological forces converged on a specific location. So we have a time, and we have a location, and we have a horoscope. And that horoscope represents the individual who started life at that moment, at that place. What happens then is that everything proceeds forward. The earth continues around the sun, the earth rotates on its axis, and all of the other planets move forward in their orbits. And we're saying that what is a transit is when the passages of the stars at any given moment relates back to the moment of that event. So it is the new environment that what was born in that event has to relate to. So we can say of transits, which are the most common way of looking at astrology, transits are reactive. A person reacts to what the environment is at the time. That environment, as it is constantly changing, is independent of what the individual wants to do. That is to say, the individual is reacting and can only react. It cannot change the environment, and the environment, the moment of birth, does represent what the individual was trying to initiate in this rebirth. Excuse me. But the transits just are the same for everyone. Different birth charts relate to the ephemeral passage of the stars as they are in any given moment. That's what transits are. I don't know what's going on here. Something unusual. The next thing we studied were secondary progressions. And secondary progressions represent how the horoscope of the moment is extended in time. With secondary progressions, we are saying that an individual is making an assertion in life. And that assertion has effects. This is more than being just reactive. This is actually being creative or initiative in one's nature. We gave an image of what the secondary progressions were like. We said that if we drop a stone in the water, that rings come out from where the impact of the stone to the water was. And those impact rings are representations of the momentum of the impact of the dropping of the stone. In the horoscope, the progressed horoscope using secondary progressions, the rings carry with them the pattern of the original impact. So they are delineations of the natal horoscope, and they are delineations in time. And in the few days, if a person lives to be 90, they have 90 days after birth indicate the outcome or indicate the foreshadowing quality of the impact moment that is coming to birth. So secondary progressions are a projection of a horoscope into the future based on the early expression of the natal horoscope in time. Now we're going to talk about something very different. We're now going to talk about primary directions. Now, when we look at transits, we are looking at the heavens, and we're looking at especially the ecliptic, which is the band. The solar system looks like a ball with a disk around its center, and that disk is called the ecliptic. And in that disk is where we find the paths of all of the planets. Now, this is most uncomfortable. I don't know what's going on, but at any rate, with the transits, we're looking only at the motion of the planets in the ecliptic. With progressions, we're looking only at the planets in the ecliptic. When we come to primary directions, it is not oriented to the solar system and to the sun as the means of change. When we're looking at primary directions, we're looking at the axial rotation of the Earth itself. And so the primary directions are Earth-oriented. And you might say the common denominator for both secondary progressions and primary directions is the degree. 1 degree equals 1 year. In progressions, the sun moves forward 1 degree per day. At least that's the way it appears from the Earth. The Earth moves forward so that it appears that the sun has moved 1 degree. So we can see that 1 day equals 1 degree equals 1 year. But the Earth rotates on its axis so that any given point on the surface of the Earth will go through the entire zodiac in 24 hours. This means that 1 degree is every 4 minutes. And that means every 4 minutes after birth represents a year. Now this means very radical projection of time. And because it's Earth-oriented, it is very much associated with things of the Earth. Like the things that we do with the zodiac and with progressions and with transits are primarily psychological things. But the things that are done with primary directions are more material things. So we can see that this is to be a to find accurate changes in material conditions. All right, so we understand that the common denominator is 1 degree, whether it's 1 degree every 4 minutes or whether it's 1 degree every day. So what we're going to look at now is we're going to look at the horoscope that we've been looking at all along, which happens to be my own horoscope, which I know very well. And we are going to look at the main primary directions of the primary angles. And from here on in, things are going to become pretty technical. Now, it will not be as technical as what Rick did that a long time ago. My friend Rick gave us a talk on primary directions, but his was extremely technical and extremely accurate and dealing with all kinds of refinements. What we are going to do is going to be just a very simple estimation. We're not going to carry things down to the second of time, and we're not going to carry things down to the exact day that an event would take place. We're going to roughly see how this works. Because if we were to try to do a description of primary directions incomplete, it would be an entire course. And it would be an entire course that almost no one would be interested in because the math would be quite technical. We would be dealing with trigonometric arcs, and you saw a lot of those constants and that Rick gave that you need for adjusting between one type of time and another, between solar time and between sidereal time. It gets pretty complicated. I don't want to do that because I don't think there are many people at all that are interested in primary directions. It is important to understand what they are and have a rough idea of what they are so that if you want to explore it, you can explore it. And you can go into it in great detail and into great depth if you like. Rick has made a study of many years of it, and he is quite excellent at it, and he can pick out events with surprising accuracy. All right. Now from here on, we're going to work. You're not going to have to look at me any longer. You're still going to have to listen to my voice, but you won't have to look at me anymore, because now we're going to start working with the computer and with the screen, and we'll go from there. Oh. All right. Clear away something that the operating system wants to give. All right. All right, now let's just look at the constants which I just mentioned to you before. These are the primary constants which are used in all things. Just a second, I'm going to check to see that this is actually whoa, it's not showing up very well here. Well, what I did in the daytime does not. I do not understand. We have a serious technical difficulty here because please hold on. All right, I think this may be now legible. Let me check here by looking at the same kind of screen that you're looking at. Yes, we can see. I'll try just a little bit of improvement yet. Well, that will have to do because the class has to go on. All right. These are the constants that we're going to be looking at. We're going to say that since 1 degree of space equals 4 minutes of time. Now we're going to be using sidereal time all the way just to keep away from having to do too much mathematics. Sidereal time is a measurement both of time and of space. Breaking this down a little bit further, 15 minutes of space equals 3 months in direction. So we're saying 4 minutes of time equals a year. We're saying 1 minute of time equals 3 months of a direction. All right, 1 degree of space equals 4 minutes. All right. We've got the constants. Now I'm going to try to describe what we're trying to do here. Imagine you're looking south. And as you look south, you see an invisible framework that is like the sections of an orange. And where the sections of an orange meet, those are called lunes. And those lunes on the horoscope turn out to be the cusps of the houses. Now, if you stand there for 24 hours, the framework of lunes will remain the same. But because the Earth rotates on its axis from west to east, the stars appear to arise in the east and go to the west. They follow a path like the arrow that we're having in looking at this horoscope. Oh, I got to get it on. All right. Oh. All right, we're saying that the stars move in a clockwise direction relative to the cusps of the houses. Now, in working with primary directions, we are looking at when house cusps intersect the positions of planets. Now, you could use almost any house cusp, but there are only 2 house cusps that have relative accuracy. The most accurate place in a horoscope is the 10th house cusp, which is the midheaven, and that is a true north-south line. If you have an accurate time of birth, you have the midheaven with as high a degree of accuracy as you can get. The other place is the horizon, the eastern-western horizon. And so, but you can't be certain of that because the horizon is different on the surface of the Earth versus when you're talking about it from the center of the Earth. All of the tables of calculation are from the center of the Earth. And when you start dealing with the surface of the Earth, things become very funny because the Earth isn't exactly a sphere, and it's a lumpy form. It is called a problated ellipsoid, and it's a lumpy one at that, and it's very hard dealing with the eastern horizon from the surface of the Earth. Rick mentioned a little bit of that. When you're finished this evening, you may want to go back and look at what Rick said in a talk that he gave a couple years ago. He went into that material. Okay, so what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and deal with the horizon and the midheaven as the stars move into conjunction with them. Now, we're going to take the whole horizon, the east and the west, and we're going to say that anytime the horizon intersects with a planet, we're going to say that that represents a time of an event, and important event at that. So if we look, as the stars are going around, the first one that's going to get to the horizon is the moon that I'm pointing at here. Very shortly after birth, the moon comes down and it meets the western horizon. The next one that happens is as the stars go toward the ascendant, and Mars will come up and conjoin the ascendant. The next then that will happen is that Saturn, where I am pointing now, will come down to the descendant. The next thing that will happen is that the Sun will come up to the ascendant, and it'll be followed by Mercury, and it'll be followed by Venus. So what we want to do is we want to see how long it took for the moon to move to the descendant, to be on the horizon, exactly on the horizon, and that amount of time we will use the constants where every 4 minutes equals a degree of space equals 1 year. So if it took 4 minutes, if the moon came to the descendant 4 minutes after birth, that would mean that at age 1 we would be looking for some kind of event. So we're looking at this sequence. We're looking at the moon, then we're looking at Mars, then we're looking at Saturn, then we're looking at the Sun, then we're looking at Mercury, and then finally at Venus, all as they come around and meet the ascendant. All right, that's pictorially what we're trying to do. Now, let's set that aside for now. And what I have done now, I'm going to have to get up to make sure that you're seeing everything that I'm seeing. Excellent. Let's see, I want to do a little bit of... If you look at this is a table of houses for 43 degrees north. It says so right up on the top. And it is all of the it is all of the sidereal times that are pertinent to what we're looking at. Now, unfortunately, something has happened here that I'm not getting the... Okay. Okay, now we can see it all. Not very clearly, but we can see it. I don't know what is going wrong because I had this all set up and I've tested it out 3 times and then, all right. If we look here where it's scribbled in the margin, that's the natal sidereal time. That's the sidereal time that gives you the houses on the horoscope that we have looked at. Now, if we look a little further down, we see the moon. And we see the moon, and then we see the difference in sidereal time between the moon and the birth time. If we go further, then we over here on the next column, we find the sidereal time for Mars. And we then notice that there's all of this difference in time, sidereal time, between the Mars hitting the ascendant versus the natal ascendant. Then I have Saturn done next, and then over here is the Sun. Then there is Mercury, then Uranus, and then Mercury, and eventually Venus. All right, that is what we did. Now, the sidereal times that are given in the table of houses are every 4 minutes, which means they're not accurate to the degree that you want if we were trying to do prediction that came right down to the day. What we're doing is this will give us an estimated difference in sidereal time. And that is, so we're going to have an estimated time when events would occur. All right, now let's take that and set that aside. Now, let's see. All right. All right. Now you can see what we're trying to do here. Now we're looking first at the moon. The moon is in 2637 of Pisces, which means the difference between the sidereal time of when 2637 of Virgo arises. Virgo, we're looking at the whole axis, the Virgo-Pisces axis. This is the ascendant. So 2 degrees and 32 minutes after birth, that's how far the moon is from the descendant. But the difference in sidereal time is 13 degrees and 34 minutes, and that's a much less than the speed of the Earth or of the midheaven. Now, I don't know how to say what I'm trying to say. At the midheaven, a degree changes every 4 minutes. But at the ascendant, because of the angles from the surface of the Earth, or from where you are on the Earth, we're at 43 degrees north, and because the ecliptic is at an angle to the celestial equator, because of that, sometimes the ascendant will move more than 4 degrees per minute, and sometimes it will move less. Now, when you have the ascendant moving slower than the midheaven, that is called a sign of long ascension. It takes more than 2 hours for the whole sign to rise. Whereas at the midheaven, a sign will always pass through the midheaven in 2 hours all the time. It's that kind of accuracy. Now, Virgo happens to be a sign of long ascension, which means it's moving less than less than a degree every 4 minutes. It's taking longer. Like normally you would expect 2 degrees to rise in 9 minutes you would expect, but it's actually taken 13 minutes for it to rise because of the slowness of the Virgo ascendant. And this, we use the actual appearance of the degree that the moon is in, 2637, we used with that to get to the ascendant, and we're saying that took 13 minutes and 34 seconds. And that adds up to 3 years, 3 months, and 6 days if we had that kind of accuracy. So we can say that at age 3, 3¼ years, we would look for some kind of event. And actually, around age 3, we mentioned it before when we talked about the progressions and the transits. At that time, I had a very embarrassing experience with falling into a tub of catch water. And I was made fun of it for years and years after, even though this only happened when I was age 3. You know, my father would joke, well, you remember when you fell into the bucket and all of that. So this was an event, and it was an event that was important. All right, now let's. I don't want to dwell on that because it was a highly important event. Let's go here to the next one. This is when the ascendant came conjoined to Mars, which was at 6 degrees and 22 minutes of Libra, and again the ascendant was at 24 degrees in 1 minute, 5 minutes. And this means that 12 degrees in 17 minutes of the heavens after birth, Mars came to the ascendant. And again, this is the ascendant is still moving very slowly, so this took 1 hour and 3 minutes of sidereal time for Mars to come to the ascendant. And now I have to move this because, okay. This says that at age 15 years, 9 months, and 12 days, we would expect a Mars in the first house kind of event that would be important. Mind you, we're dealing only with the ascendant and with the horizon and the intersection of the horizon with the planets, which are important moments. Now it so happens that when I was 14 years old, I played football. And I injured a knee, and I re-injured it many times after that. In fact, it required surgery. But that was at 14 years and 9 months. Now, the thing we have to do, let's see if we can go back here. If we look at the horoscope, the horoscope says I was born at 2:30 a.m., which is not correct. If you're going to deal with primary directions, you want to be accurate to within 30 seconds of the birth time. And the way it turns out is the baby book that my parents kept for me showed me being born at 2:30 a.m., and that's what is in here in the data of the horoscope. But by correction and by rectification, it actually turns out that I was born closer to between 2:31 and 2:32. I'm sorry, 2:32 and 2:33 a.m. That is early in the morning, which means that with a correction, the sidereal time would be less. The elapsed amount of sidereal time would be lapsed, and then you get to the event when I injured myself when I was 14 years old and had the injury that repeated itself. That turns out to be very accurate. It turns out that gives us something, a correction, so that all of the times that we come up with from the 2:30 time of birth are going to be off, and they're going to be off by the difference of between 2 and 3 minutes if you're trying to bring it down to seconds. Now, if we go back to the event of childhood, there were only 13 minutes and 34 seconds, and that means that this event happened at an earlier time, but the amount of since the elapsed time is so much less, the percentage of it in the correction is not so much. So it was still when I was 3 years old, but it wasn't 3 years and 3 months. All right. I realize this is going very fast, and it isn't. All right. The next astronomical event to take place was when the ascendant or the descendant, when Saturn revolved down to the descendant. And we can see that there the elapsed was 18 degrees of space, but that 18 degrees of space took an entire hour, 35 minutes, and 38 seconds, which means that there would be an event when I was 23 and 9 months, but because of the correction we're making, it would be that I was age 22. I couldn't put all of that on these sheets. It would have been way, way too complicated. All right, so what we're talking about is when I'm 22 years old, was there indeed a Saturn event? And at this time, I was in love with a woman, and we were to be married. And it came down to the time for her to make the decision of when we were going to be married, and she said no. And this changed the entire course of my life. I would have probably have stayed in California. I was living in California at the time, and after this rejection, I came back to Wisconsin, and it changed the whole trajectory of my life. So we now have two events that are quite accurate. We have the injury that happened when I played football in high school, and now we have the rejection of marriage, and that, so all three events, all three times that we've looked at as being highly significant when the horizon conjoined a planet, all three of them produce significant events. Now let's move on to the next one. The next one is when the sun moved up to the ascendant. That is when 11 degrees and 16 minutes of Scorpio came to the ascendant. And the sidereal, now let's go back a second to the one we just looked at. Because I was living in California, I was living at a different latitude. And living at a different latitude, the time changed. So that if we were trying to get the exact moment that the woman said no to me, that changed my life so that I wouldn't stay in California and it would instead seek a life there, that you'd have to adjust for the change in latitude, geographical latitude of California versus Wisconsin. In fact, the difference between where I was born and had the first incident with the slop water versus the football injury, there was a very slight difference in change of latitude there, just a few minutes, but enough that if you were trying to predict, you would have to be very, very accurate. All right, so now let's go on to the fourth event. And the fourth event, as we're saying, is when the sun comes to the ascendant. Now, this is quite a long period of time. If we look at this, we see that the amount of sidereal time, 4 degrees, 4 minutes, and 10 seconds, comes out to being 61 years, and I didn't even bother with the months and the days. 61 years. But we have to make a correction because the time of birth was not 2:30, but it was between 2:32 and 2:33, so it came earlier than the 61 years. And at this time, at age 60, I retired from my profession. The sun is in the second house, which is exactly what you would expect. It would be the culmination of a profession. So we see how very accurate this is without us doing all the mathematics to come up with pinpoint accuracy. The first event was a social event, and it was an emotional embarrassment. The second event was an injury. It was a personal injury, and it was in the first house, indicating the physical body where injuries take place is in your physical body. The third event was in the seventh house, which is the house of marriage, and no was said to me. In fact, at 2 different times in life, I tried to marry this same woman, and in both cases, it didn't work out, and it didn't work out until the last minute. So this was the first instance, the Saturn in the 7th house. And so now that we're talking about the sun being at the ascendant, or being coming to a primary direction, an ascended primary direction, we see that what has happened is that it's a professional matter because the sun is in the second house. All right. Let's look at the next one. The next one is when Uranus came to the I suppose we could do this. All right, now we've got the horoscope here again. We see that the first event happened in the 7th house, the second event happened in the 1st house, the third event happened in the 7th house, the fourth event happened in the 2nd house, and now we're dealing with Uranus in the 8th house. And see, everything is shifting, and it's shifting in this direction, and planets are coming either to the descendant or the ascendant, and in this case, Uranus is coming to the descendant. All right, let's go back and look at the numbers again. In this case, we're looking at 67 years, 7 months, and some days. Actually, it's a little bit less, and the correction doesn't have to be quite so much this time because the ascendant is picking up speed. It is a sign of long ascension, but it doesn't stay always at the same ascension, so there's a variable. So you can't have a constant that lasts forever when you're making these corrections, because the signs of long ascension and short ascension vary in their velocity. But at any rate, around 66 years, we would expect an event. And since Uranus is in the 8th house, which is the house of death, at this time my father passed on and I got a small inheritance. Not much of an inheritance, enough to buy an automobile. I think the first new automobile I had in my life happened at that time. My father passed on. All right, but we can see again there is an accuracy. And the accuracy is correct, and it's true to the house, and it is true to the time, even though we're doing very rough estimations of time. So I don't want you to think that this is pinpoint accuracy, and I don't think the most mathematical astrologers who do these things with great precision would almost vomit at how how sloppy I'm being with the accuracy. It's good enough for saying the rough things that I'm saying now. Okay. The next that comes up is the Mercury. The Mercury comes into the ascendant by progression. All right, I suppose we can look at the chart again. We can see now that Mercury, which was way down here, has moved up and it's now in the ascendant by progression. All right. And this turns out to be 87 years and 7 months, which is interesting since I'm 85 years old. So according to this would be in the future. But we have that little correction to make. And when we make that little correction, it turns out to be a couple years ago. It turns out to be right around 85. And within the last year, I have published a book. I've written the book, I've written several books for workbooks for classes, but those are ongoing thing. And this book was a statement of spiritual philosophy, just exactly the kind of thing. The third house is writings and communications, and Mercury's in the third house. So when it comes to the midheaven, it comes to the ascendant, that's just the kind of thing that you would expect. Again, this is accuracy that is just amazing. How in each of these moments something has happened, and something has happened that has changed my life or has been very important. Now we run into a problem with my visuals here, and the next one up is Venus, but I can't get Venus on the screen, which is all right because it's in the future anyway. It's in the future because it'll be when I'm around 89 or 90 years old that the ascendant will come to my Venus, or my Venus will have moved up to the ascendant, and maybe I will be in love, or maybe I'll write a book of poetry, or I'll do some artwork or something of that nature. But that one's in the future. We can't say, but we can say that there's positive and promise of the future. All right? we have gotten through the hardest part of what we're looking at. Now, all right, we're looking at the horoscope again. Now we're going to look at the other of the primary angles. We're going to be looking at the midheaven and the vertical angle. And as we said, this is the most accurate. Even though we had that 2 minute of time correction, this needs some changing. But at any rate, we're going to look at primary directions to the midheaven. We're not going to look at primary directions to any of these cusps because we don't really know where those cusps are. They're all dependent on the philosophy. There are about at least 10 different philosophies for how you derive the cusps, and they're each based on a different kind of geometry. So we don't we don't know those things. Now I do believe that by taking cusps and from a theoretical beginning point and moving them, you can rectify cusps so that you don't even need a table of houses. You can rectify according to events. Because as you can see, even though we haven't been real fastidious about carrying the numbers out to the final degree, we're pretty accurate. We're talking about every one is a major event in my life. So if we did the same thing with all the other cusps and we found out the events that related to them, we could come to a lot of other events in life, and we could find them quite accurately, and we could make a much more accurate horoscope with that. But it wouldn't. But by looking at the event and the attitudes that surround the event, you can understand the psychology. Like, for example, when the woman said no to me, I was emptied out. It's sort of like I plunged into a deep hole in my life. I was probably too immature to have been a good marriage partner anyway, and I've never been really good marriage material, and it took me a long time to come to that realization. But in the moment when the woman said no to me, it was a very dark period, and I actually punished myself by doing something very bad to myself. I put myself in danger, and in that danger I got beat up, all because I didn't know how to react to the no saying. All right, now we're looking at the angles to the vertical angle. We're looking at all the possible primary directions. The first is that when Pluto comes to the midheaven is the first one. The second one is when Jupiter comes to the comes to the fourth house cusp. And the third is when Neptune comes to the midheaven. So we can see it works by quadrant. Only this quadrant and this quadrant can produce primary directions from the midheaven. So we have the primary conjunction to Pluto, the opposition to Jupiter, and then the conjunction to Neptune. All right, that's what we're working with. We're looking at only 3 this time. And let's do these are the tables of houses in question. This is the natal midheaven, which is at 23 degrees of Gemini. We can see that. And the Pluto doesn't happen until quite a long time. And it happens somewhere over in here. Then comes the Jupiter. And then comes the conjunction to Neptune quite a long time later. So this is something, if you want to do poor man's progressed angles, you can do that following this method. You'd have to work with the tables of houses, and you'd have to do a lot of corrections in there, but it's much less mathematical than working with the arcs, the trigonometric arcs. All right. Come on. All right. All right. Now, when we're looking at the midheaven directions, it is exactly 1 degree every 4 minutes of sidereal time, and that equals 1 year. And we're saying that at birth, the midheaven is at 23 degrees and 3 minutes of Gemini, and the sidereal time for that is 5 hours, 42 minutes, and 34 seconds. All right? All right. The first that we're looking at here is when, so sometime at approximately age 38, the midheaven came to my Pluto, which is friendship. Pluto's in the natal horoscope. Pluto is in 1 degree and 30 some minutes of Leo. And when the midheaven is, the sidereal times are between 8:12 and 8:17. So somewhere in there is when it got to Pluto. And that approximately comes to age 38. And of all things, this is when my marriage broke up. I did marry, and the whole relationship lasted 12 years, but the marriage lasted only 3. And it happened around closer to age 39 than to 38, but we're dealing with approximations. And this changed my life. It changed my life altogether. When you are identified with someone else and everything in your life is focused around that person, the problem was my life wasn't focused enough around that person. I spent too much time working with my spiritual studies and with the bookstore and with counseling and with my profession, and I did not give enough time to my wife and to my marriage. But when I divorced at around age 39, that changed my life, and I didn't look anymore to a married life, and I dedicated myself much more to my higher calling. The second event is when the Jupiter comes to the nadir, and when Jupiter came to the nadir was around the same time that I retired. And if we look on the horoscope and bring the horoscope back in here, we see that the nadir is ruled by Jupiter, and this is retirement. How you end up your life is the fourth house. So when the heavens turned and Jupiter came here, it was the beginning of my retirement, and this indicates the more of the relaxation that my retirement has been and the expansion into other things. And it wasn't so much just a change of profession, just gives you more the attitude of it and how it affected the midheaven, which is your midheaven is always your spiritual aspirations. All right. The final one we're looking at hasn't happened yet, and that'll happen around 89 or 90, and that is the midheaven will come. This is supposed to be a Neptune. The Neptune will come to the midheaven, and there's hope that I could have some great spiritual enlightenment. It could be even the passing on of myself into the higher spiritual worlds. So I have something Neptunian and something Venusian to look forward to for big events when I'm around 89 or 90. Now that's about as far as we want to go tonight. I think this gives you a rough idea of what you can do with primary directions. I don't know if we're going to do more with primary directions. I think about the possibility of looking at primary directions for all of the presidents at the time of their inauguration, but that would be a huge and enormous mathematical task. I may get ambitious and want to try that, and if we do that, that will be what we do the next time. If not, we'll move on to something else. I thank you very much for listening to this. It's a little bit chaotic mathematically, but I think you understand more now what primary directions are and the things that can be done with them. And that's about it for tonight. Thank you very much for listening. I hope it's helpful for you. If you have questions about it, ask questions, and I'll try to do the best that I can to answer.